This video is brought to you by 3, bringing you 4G at no extra cost and some exclusive deals over at btech.com.
Hey guys, welcome to BTech. We've got 3 smartphones here, 3 budget smartphones available for under £100. The Huawei Ascend G6 in the middle, on top of it's the Motorola Moto E and the Acer Liquid Z5 below it. The Motorola Moto E costs just £79 on O2 right now, £89 standard RRP. It's also got a nano coating and Gorilla Glass, so the design is really top notch. The highest pixel density means its screen is also going to be the sharpest. The Huawei Ascend G6 or the EE Kestrel looks pretty decent, looks styled like its bigger brother, but the real highlight of it is that 4G on board. 4G means you're going to get super fast internet, and all for just £99, so you'll have to pay extra for that 4G line. The Acer Liquid Z5 has a unibody design. It's got a 5-inch display and stereo speakers up top and bottom, so perfect for multimedia, anyone who doesn't want to plug in headphones. How do the 3 stack up against one another? Well, in terms of design, it really is the Motorola that comes out on top, followed by the Acer Liquid Z5, then the EE Kestrel. The nano coating on the Motorola Moto E means it's going to be the hardiest, and we already mentioned that Gorilla Glass screen as well. Its curvaceousness means it sits the best in the hand, and the small screen also means it is the most manageable of the lot. You've also got a front-facing mono speaker at the base. Putting that down, and the Acer Liquid Z5 with its unibody design really comes up trumps thanks to those speakers up top and bottom. You've also got a button around the back that can quick launch that 5 megapixel autofocus camera, and its unibody, the matte backing, feels pretty solid, and anyone who wants that large premium smartphone flagship experience in terms of a big phone but doesn't want to pay the earth for it will definitely get that, at least in the build, when it comes to the Acer Liquid Z5. The Huawei Ascend G6 or the EE Kestrel is the cheapest based on the fact, or the worst, because the 3.5mm headphone jack's in a really awkward location. It's on the left hand side. You've also got an incredibly flimsy back cover. Those clicks should send shivers down your spine, because they certainly send shivers down ours. That said though, we'll come on to the internals later, and while there's microSD expandability on all of them, like we just saw under this flap, this is a phone with the largest internal storage, which is mighty impressive at 8GB for just £99. As far as the screens go, once again, the Motorola Moto E wins out. As far as the head-on experience, it's got the highest pixel density, over 250, so text looks very nice and sharp on here. We can wait for the camera to focus a bit. There you go. You can see text looks very nice and sharp, and the whole user experience looks vibrant and poppy as well. Putting that to one side, and the EE Kestrel comes second in terms of sharpness, but it's definitely noticeably more washed out than the Motorola Moto E. If we swipe through the UI though, clarity being on point, reading basic web pages and text should be an absolute doddle on here. It's a decent size as well, 4.5 inches, by contrast 4.3 inches and 5 inches. If we take a look, viewing angles are pretty okay. It's a relatively full brightness, but they aren't anything to shout home about. Probably the weakest screen in terms of quality is the Acer Liquid Z5. The Liquid Z5 has a WVGA, full WVGA screen, so it's the lowest resolution. Despite having a great aspect ratio for movies, therefore, it won't be that great for text. The additional size zone means your movies are going to look pretty good. If you're streaming from Netflix, you won't really notice the low resolution all that much, but if you get some higher res files on here, then it might be a little bit irksome that they're not showing off to full perfection on this display. Also, we can definitely attest to the fact viewing angles are the weakest on the Acer Liquid Z5. As far as what's inside these phones go, it is Android on all of them. Android 4.4, Android 4.3, Android 4.2. So in that order, if you're an Android buff, that's the order you'll want to get them in. The Motorola Moto E is also the only phone that's been promised an upgrade to the latest version of Android. The Huawei Ascend G6 or EE Kestrel, whatever you want to call it, has Emotion UI on top, which is Huawei's own take on Android, which has no applications tray and a heavily skinned system. You can see you've got folders, you've got widgets, and you've got shortcuts, and that is about it. We don't love it based on the fact anyone who's learned how to use Android might have to relearn how to use this, but it's simple enough to get your head around, and anyone coming from an iPhone will probably feel more at home here. You've got 3 capacitive buttons below the screen as well. As far as Acer goes, it's again a relatively stock Android, more so than Emotion UI. You've got your stock applications tray, only addition being the download tab, and you've also got a stock pause pull down bar. You've also got some quick toggles as well, but there's a real highlight on here. There's this thing called quick mode, which allows you to jump into something called senior mode. Perfect for anyone who's hard of sight. You can set this up as you want with custom contacts and then give it to, say, your mum, your dad, or grandparent, and they will be able to use this phone pretty much out of the box without too much explanation. The mode switcher also allows for a basic mode and a keypad mode, not to mention a classic mode for someone who just doesn't care about apps or widget shortcuts quite so much. We can jump out of this and very clearly see our mode switcher and jump back to the default mode, which allows for a variable number of home screens and again a relatively stock experience like we said. The Motorola Moto E does have one thing up its sleeve, one trick that stock Android doesn't have, and that is Motorola Alert. When we connect the internet with this phone, we'll be able to download it through the Google Play Store. What this allows us to do is use a glimpse-like tracking system, so this thing can let someone know where you are at any given time for a set period of time. It'll also let them know when you've arrived at a set location, and it will also sound an emergency alarm. So £79 or £89 depending on where you get it. This is a great phone to get someone who maybe you want to have a little bit of extra security. Now, what's inside these phones? Well, it's a dual-core processor on two of these devices, a Qualcomm Snapdragon 200 on the Moto E with 1GB of RAM. It's a MediaTek dual-core processor on the Acer Liquid Z5 with 512MB of RAM, and it's a quad-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 400 processor with a whopping 1GB of RAM on the Huawei Ascend G6. You've also got 4GB of internal memory and microSD expandability on the Motorola Moto E and Acer Liquid Z5. And like we said, 8GB on the Huawei Ascend G6, which is fantastic for that price point. Definitely performance. We can expect that to nail it. So the Huawei Ascend G6 is probably going to be the best for gaming, even though you don't have that decent speakers on here by comparison to the other two. They're not front facing. The reason it's going to be best for gaming, that 8GB is going to take the most games on it for games you can't install onto micro SD card. As far as the cameras go, you've got 5-megapixel fixed focus camera on the Motorola Moto E, but on which is right here, on the Acer Liquid Z5 and the Huawei Ascend G6 or EE Kestrel, you've got autofocus cameras, both of which have flashes. No flash on the Moto E. The Moto E is definitely the weakest, therefore it won't be able to do any kind of macro shooting. These two devices take very comparable pictures. What's nice about the Acer Liquid Z5 is the user interface allows for separate control over focus and exposure. We can very quickly show you what we mean right there. So if we tap through, immediately it's focused macro, and then we can expose on a different part of the screen. So you should be able to make out exposure and focus are on different areas. The camera UI on the EE Kestrel or Huawei Ascend G6 is relatively simple, but it's got a nice arrangement of options, including panorama, shooting effects, and HDR. Shooting effects being the relatively stock shooting effects, which is really just filters. Generally though, like we said, both perform pretty well. Videos shot in 720p, pretty choppy, but you wouldn't really expect any more from a £99 device. So yeah, hopefully you have enjoyed our comparison. It's worth saying that that the EE Kestrel is the only one with 4G, kind of a given because that's its real focus. You've got the super build phone, really solid, comfortable to hold, great screen experience. You've got the 4G phone with the best processor and the best internal memory as well. And you've got the multimedia centric phone. Stereo front facing speakers, it's a larger screen, also going to be the best for seniors with that large display and that quick mode. And of course, you've still got a unibody design on here, despite the fact it is just £99, and it's available in a dual SIM version too. And it's also worth noting that there's no front-facing camera on the Motorola Moto E, whereas there is on the other two devices. If you've got any questions about either of these budget phones, please ping them in the comments section below. If you liked the video or found it useful, make sure you click the like button and make sure you head over to btech.com where you can find the latest in smartphones, tablets, smart gadgets, and some awesome deals as well. Thanks for watching.
At the top of the screen is where you can find 3 hand-picked videos for your viewing pleasure. On the left is where you can subscribe, and on the right hand side you can find some exclusive deals if you head over to btech.com.